Hi, my name is Yui. I'm happy to be a guide for you in this series. We aim to bring the knowledge of the Microsoft security products for you so that you can understand and apply these technical configurations for your real business. Let's move on to the most exciting part of the Zero Trust model, where you will protect and monitor the most vulnerable components of your organization, that is, data. So now we will jump into the last layer in this series, data. And in the first video of this layer, you will learn how to protect your organization's sensitive data with Microsoft Information Protection. You will see how Microsoft Information Protection can help you detect sensitive information across your enterprise, apply custom control to meet your unique requirements, and investigate suspicious activities. With Microsoft Information Protection, you can discover, classify, and protect sensitive and business-critical content throughout its life cycle across your organization. You can access Microsoft Information Protection capabilities from the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center. To get started, select Data Classification. This page provides an overview of how sensitive information and labels are being used across your organization's location. Next, select Sensitive Info Types. Microsoft 365 includes many built-in sensitive information types that are ready for you to use in your organization. Built-in sensitive information types have identify and protect credit card numbers, bank account numbers, passport numbers, and more based on patterns that can be identified by a regular expression or a function. In addition, corroborative evidence such as keywords and checksums can be used to identify sensitive information type, confidence level in the evaluation process. By identifying and protect a different type of sensitive information, you can create a custom sensitive information type. To do this, select Create Info Types. This wizard will guide you through creating the new sensitive information type. First, provide a name and description. Select Next to continue. And you must add a matching element, which is the sensitive information that this type will look for in content. To increase the accuracy of detection, you can optionally add multiple supporting elements. So let's add an element. Next, select the drop-down arrow to specify the type of content the element will detect. Let's select keywords. We will enter keywords related to a sensitive acquisition project. Select Next to continue. Review the settings and then select Finish. You can perform matching tests using sample data before you create the sensitive type. In this case, we'll select No to immediately create it. Let's search for the sensitive info type we just created. And as you can see, it's available to use. Next, select Show All to expand the navigation menu. Next, select Information Protection. So sensitivity labels are used to classify email messages, documents, sites, and more. When a label is applied, the container or site is protected based on the settings you choose. To add a sub-label for the existing highly confidential label, select the ellipsis. Next, select Add Sub-Label. We'll create a new sensitivity label that will be used to protect confidential information for projects PALS. First, provide name and description. Encryption allows you to control who can access files and email messages that have this label applied. You can apply an encryption policy while creating the label or add it later. So let's apply encryption to this label. Let's assign permissions to specific users and groups. Select Add Users or Groups. Search for the group of users. Save the assigned permissions. Select Next to continue. And you can enable content marking to add custom headers, footers, and watermarks to the content that has this label applied. Let's enable this feature. And we just add a watermark to the content. Next, select Customize Text. Note that this text will appear as a watermark only on labeled documents. It will not be applied to email message. Provide the watermark text and font details. Save your changes and select Next to continue. You can select the setting you want to take effect when this label is applied to a Microsoft 365 groups or SharePoint site. Note that the settings aren't applied to files, so they don't impact downloaded copies of files. Let's enable these settings. Specify the privacy of Microsoft 365 group connected team size. We'll select private, so only members can access to the site. And you can also configure access for unmanaged devices. We will allow limited web-only access to this device. Select Next to continue. With auto-labeling, you can configure this label to be automatically applied to show a message to user recommending they apply it themselves when sensitive content is detected in emails or documents matching the condition you choose. Let's enable auto-labeling for Office apps. Scroll down to see more settings. And to automatically apply this label to sensitive content, add the conditions you want to detect. So let's add one now. Select the credit card number. Search for the project BASOS and then select it. By default, this label will only be applied to content matching all of these conditions. To apply the policy to content that matches any of these conditions, select the drop-down arrow and select any of these. Next, let's specify the action that will be applied when content match these conditions. So we will recommend that users apply the policies. Enter the message that will be displayed to users when the label is applied. Select Next to continue. Here you can review and edit the settings as needed. We will select Submit to create the label. The label was created successfully. This label will now detect sensitive information related to project BASOS and suggest appropriate labeling to the end user. Let's select Done to return to the information protection page. Note that after a label is created, you can still edit its settings as well as publish or delete it. The label will not be available for use until it is associated with a policy. Next, select Label Policies. You can create sensitivity labels policies to publish one or more labels to your user's Office app, SharePoint sites, and Microsoft File groups. Once published, users can apply labels to protect their own content. In this case, we will add a label to the highly confidential label policy, which has already been published. To do this, select the policy name, select Edit Policy. Here you can see the published sensitivity labels. Next, select Edit. And we will add the label we just created to the project BASOS. Next, continue through the wizard until you get to the Review Your Settings step. Select Submit to apply the changes. The policy updated successfully. Note that it may take up to 24 hours before users will be able to see the labels in their Office apps. Select Done to exit the wizard. The policy updated successfully, and Sensitivity labels created in the Microsoft 365 Compliance Centers can also be applied to supported containers, including Microsoft Teams sites, Microsoft 365 groups, and SharePoint sites. Let's see how to apply the sensitivity label in Microsoft Teams. To get started, let's create a new team. Select the drop-down arrow to apply the sensitivity label to the team. Next, select Highly Confidential. Select the project BIS label we created earlier. When you apply this label to a supported container, the label automatically applies the configure options to the connected site or group. The public and org-wide privacy options are grayed out because teams with this sensitivity label must be private. Select private to continue creating the team. Provide name and then select create. Next, let's add a couple of members to the team. The sensitive content in this team will now be protected, and only the members of this team can view the content. Let's return to the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center to look at some other information protection capability. Select the Auto Labeling tab. With Auto Labeling policies, you can automatically apply sensitivity labels to email messages, OneDrive files, and SharePoint files that contain sensitive information. This labeling is applied by services rather than applications, so you don't need to worry about what type client the user is using. So let's create an auto-labeling policy to ensure SharePoint data protection to project BIS is labeled appropriately in the case of accidental or malicious action by employees. Here you can choose an industry regulation to see the policy templates you can use to classify information, or you can create a custom policy to start from scratch. In this case, we will create a custom policy. Enter a unit name for the policy. Here you will choose the locations where you want to apply the label. Let's enable this label for Exchange. Let's also enable this label for SharePoint sites. By default, no SharePoint sites are included, so let's choose a site to include. Enter the site URL and then select the button to add it. Next, choose the URL we just added. The site is now added. Select Done to close the pane. Select Next to continue. Here you can set up common or advanced rules. We will skip this and continue to the next step. Here you can define rules for content in all the locations you specify. This label will be automatically applied to content that matches the rules and related conditions here. Let's add a new rule. Provide a name for the rules. Next, add a condition for the rule. And we'll select Content contains sensitive info types. Next, add the sensitive info types. We will add credit card number and project BIS. Select the drop-down arrow to apply this policy to content that matches any of these conditions. Here you will choose a label to auto-apply. Note that users will see this label applied to files that match the rules and conditions for this policy. Let's choose the label we created earlier. To help ensure that the label is being applied to the correct items, you will need to run it in simulation mode before turning it on. You can do this right away or wait until later. So running the policy in simulation mode provides insight into the effectiveness of the policy and enables you to reuse real data in your production environment with no impact on end users until the policy is published. So let's run the policy in simulation mode now. The auto-labeling policy was created successfully, and you can check the policy simulation overview in 24 hours to review the result. Select Done to return to the information rotation page. While the policy simulation is running, you can see its progress. Select the simulation to view its details. Here, you can see an overview of the simulation results so far and the policy details. To close the detail page, select Information Protection. Now let's look at data loss preventions. To comply with business standards and industry regulations, organizations need to prevent additional oversharing and leakage of sensitive information. You can use data loss prevention policies to have identify and protect your organization's sensitive information, monitor policy violations for further investigations, and have users learn to stay compliant. Let's create a new policy. We'll create a custom policy to define what to do with the sensitive information related to project BASOS that is detected and categorized by the previous policies we created. Provide a name for the policy. Next, choose the locations where you want content protected. We'll leave the default selection to protect content in Exchange email, Teams chat, and channel messages, and OneDrive and SharePoint documents. Here you can customize the type of content you want to protect. The File Content that contains option enables you to quickly set up a policy that protects only sensitive information or label content. Select Edit to choose the types of file content to protect it. Select the drop-down arrow to add a sensitive info type. Next, select Add. Scroll down to select credit card number. Next, scroll down to select Project BASOS. Next, add your selections. Select Done to close the pane. Save your changes. Select Next to continue configuring the policy settings. Here you can specify what to do if this policy detects sensitive information. Note that the detailed activity reports will be created automatically, so you can review the content that matches this policy. By default, this policy is configured to show policy tips to users and send them an email notification. So let's customize the tips and email. Select the checkbox to customize the email text. Enter the custom notifications, and let's also customize the policy tip text. Select OK to complete your customization. You can also configure the policy to detect when a specific amount of sensitive information is being shared at one time. Let's configure the policy to detect content that contains at least one instance of the same sensitive information type. Select Next to continue configuring the policy settings. You can also customize who has access to content and enable people to override the policy's restrictions. By default, this policy lets people who see the tip override the policy, so let's require business justification to override. Let's also select the option to override the rules automatically if they report it as a false positive. Select Next to configure more policy settings. You can choose to turn on the policy or settings out first, so we will turn it on right away. Now let's create the policy. In the Office 365 portal, you can access apps. To add sensitivity labels are needed. In this case, SharePoint is already open, so let's switch to that browser tab. Let's create a new Word document containing sensitive information to see the initial policy we created in action. Select New to open a new Word document. Select the drop-down arrow at the top of the page to save the change. Provide name for the file. Select the page to type a letter to shareholders regarding project's best sort. As expected, the conditions trigger the policy and the message suggests applying the sensitivity label. Users can simply click the button in the policy tip to apply the policy easily and accurately without training. Select Change Now to apply. Close the Browser tab to return to SharePoint. Here you can confirm that sensitivity label was applied to the Word document. Now let's upload files containing sensitive information. Next, refresh the page. Notice that the second auto-labeling policy we created automatically applies sensitive labels to these documents. Now let's return to the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center to get more information about how this label is being used. So let's navigate to the Data Classification page and select Activity Explorer. Here you can review activity related to content that contains sensitive information or has labels applied, such as what labels were changed, what files were modified, and more. Label activity is monitored across Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, and endpoint devices. Scroll down to review the activity. In the activity log, you can see that someone changed the label for a SharePoint document. So let's dive into this activity further. You can see that the label was changed manually and it was downgraded. This activity is suspicious because the file contains highly sensitive information about project BASOS. Let's select the most recent activity in the log. Auto-labeling policies protect your organization even when labels are edited maliciously. As you can see, the label labeling policy automatically relabeled the document after it was downgraded. Scroll to the top of the page. Next, select Content Explorer. Here you can explore the email and docs in your organization that contain sensitive information or have labels applied. So let's explore the content for project BASOS. Let's drill into the SharePoint short content. Open the acquisition document that had the suspicious label activity we looked at earlier. In the pane, you can see the short view of the document. So let's take a look at the document details. You can see the policy matches sensitivity label, who created and modified the content, sensitive information types, and other information about the file. You just learned how Microsoft Information Protection can help you detect sensitive information across your enterprise, apply custom controls to meet your unique requirements, and investigate suspicious behavior. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.